Hey there, and welcome to another episode of HomeTech.fm. Thank you so much for joining us. Jason Griffin here, joined as usual by my partner Seth. Seth, how are you?
Good, man. How's it going? I see that HHS is going to be on the cover of CE Pro.
Yeah, this is an exciting deal for us, and something I definitely am happy to share with our audience. As everybody, I think, who listens to the show is well aware at this point, I recently relocated out of Los Angeles to Denver and took a job with Harrison Home Systems, which we'll probably refer to moving forward as HHS. And I'm proud to say that Harrison Home Systems is featured on the cover of the upcoming CE Pro, which should be out by the time this episode's, the electronic version is out now. In any event, they've done a ton of great work to kind of warrant their placement on the cover, and I think the story is really good. And most of I shouldn't say most. All of that work predated me, so I can take zero credit for it. But I am super happy to be on board with them, and I just hope that I can help them sort of build on that momentum. I think they're a very strong company, and they've done a lot of really good things and made a lot of good decisions over the years, and I'm just super happy to be on board.
Yeah, that's got to make you feel good. This is just so anybody on the outside of the industry doesn't know. It's kind of like being featured on Sports Illustrated. Like this is what we have to go by. We're not super athletes, but we get our companies on the cover of CE Pro. Right.
No, totally. We've been talking to industry partners about it, and we always make that caveat. We say, look, Harrison Home Systems just got featured on the cover of CE Pro, and for us, this is the leading publication of our industry, and for us, this is a very, very big accomplishment and something that shouldn't be underestimated. And so far, we've had very good response from a lot of our partners and people that work with us in the industry and have their own little, I shouldn't say little, but have their own outlets and social media channels. And we've gotten a lot of people sharing that story. And we, of course, think it's a very big deal. And so far, we've, people have generally agreed with us. And like I said, I'm just super excited to be on board. I feel like I jumped on with the A team.
Yeah, definitely. So, speaking of good things, we had a really good interview tonight with Peter Hoddie he's actually from a company called Kinoma, which is a subsidiary of Marvell. And I think this interview was really good for the tinkerers in our crowds, the really power users, the people who like to make things and put things together. I think they're gonna find this interview very interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree. It was a fascinating conversation to me, and Peter is a incredibly credentialed guy. He's got a really impressive background in the world of software and development, and Kinoma Create is the main product that is kind of their current offering that we were really spent the bulk of the interview focusing on. But really the takeaway is simple, and that's if you're somebody who's interested in developing or getting into the smart home, and you've got an idea for a product or a solution, Kinoma Create, something you should be looking at. It's it's a developer, it's a prototyping platform, and beyond that, the conversation was just really interesting. He's got some very, very insightful thoughts about the Internet of Things and how this whole world is evolving. And I really enjoyed the conversation, and certainly would encourage anybody listening to stay tuned and listen to that whole conversation. I thought it was great.
Yep, definitely. We've got a couple of housekeeping things to do. First, Patreon shout out to Michael Bullock, who has very generously helped us out on the show, become a patron of the show, and really up the ante, and has us kind of worried about doing a live show in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, we really appreciate it, Michael. If you're listening, super generous donation. And for anybody who might not be familiar with that, Patreon is a platform that we're using to underwrite the show, so to speak. And you can become a supporter of the show for as little as $1 a month. And If you want to learn more about that, you can just go to HomeTech.fm/support. Michael came on board this week with a immensely generous donation, and we just wanted to give him his due on air and tell him that we really appreciate it. It was awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
And speaking of that, one of the things that we have just within the last week kind of unveiled and put out there is this Slack chat channel. And if anybody who's not, let me back up. If anybody's listening who's not aware of Slack, it is basically a chat room, but very, very well executed. They've got apps for iOS and Android and desktop and web, and it's just a beautifully done environment. And we have unveiled a Slack channel for anybody who is a patron of the show, and so you can become a patron of the show for as little as $1 a month. And we unveiled this Slack channel for people last week, and Seth, we've had amazing results with that. People have just really embraced it, and that Slack chat channel for HomeTech has become already a very valuable resource, in my opinion.
Yeah, you can reach out to a number of people who are in there, just asking a question. I've posted some of the things that I'm doing throughout the day on there, and gotten some feedback from other people from not only around the country but around the world. So I think moving forward, that's really going to be a killer place to be. And right, it's if you support the show, even as little as $1 a month, you're in. That's $12 a year, and you'd be part of this huge I feel like on NPR now, right? But we really do appreciate our patrons, and we really wanted to figure out a way we could give back, and this is one way we could do it. I know that next week no one's going to be listening to this show anyway, because we'll all be waiting with bated breath to find out about the new iPad Pro and the new Apple TV.
Yes, so we have an Apple event coming up, don't we?
Yes, we do, and I will definitely be in what we call the hub there during that time, kind of posting my thoughts as I watch along. So if anybody else wants to join, feel free. We'll kind of make jokes and hopefully, maybe I don't think there's going to be a new Apple TV. I know.
No, don't tell me that.
Too many times burned, man. Too many times burned.
Before we get there, though, I will close that conversation with just saying that we are going to refer to it as the hub, and that is, again, just something that we would encourage people to get involved in. So far, we've seen tremendous results, and everybody who's already participating in that chat, we really appreciate it. Like, you guys are the number one supporters of the show, and we love it. But yeah, we're looking forward to this Apple event, which is, as you're listening to the show, it's going to be coming right around the corner. And Seth and I have been sort of, I don't know, internally taking bets a little bit about what's going to happen. And I think if a new Apple TV is not announced, there is a small chance that my head might explode.
Just a small one, huh? If they spend like 45 minutes talking about some music service or something, and then like, oh yeah, and here's a little bit of HomeKit, that's generally when I see this vision of you just taking your laptop and throwing it clear across whatever coffee bar you're sitting in at the time.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a little tough. I'm pretty convinced personally that they are going to announce a new Apple TV, but you never know with Apple what's going to happen. But I do think that they will, and I think the fact that they, not that long ago dropped the pricing on the existing Apple TV from $99 to $69, I think that was a sign. We all kind of know. There's the Apple rumor mill, and you have to keep an eye on that. You have to take everything with a grain of salt. But at a certain point, you hear enough rumors that you buy in, and I do think that Apple is gonna announce a new Apple TV very shortly here.
We will see.
Yes, we will.
I guess I'm hoping they will too, and hopefully that will be the bigger introduction for HomeKit. That will be their quote unquote hub. But I'm not going to ring the bell until they actually do announce it, because, like you said, you never know what Apple's doing. So,
one product we do know that is new is a new Nest thermostat, which is, I don't know, I guess surprising. What do you think, Seth?
I guess surprising, kind of boring though.
Yeah.
Third generation Nest has a 40% bigger screen, which I saw a picture of. Looks pretty nice, but the previous generation looked nice. It says it has 10 temperature sensors and for increased accuracy. And I think those temperature sensors are actually inside the Nest and not remote sensors
that was my question was, and I admittedly have not looked into it yet, but when it says 10 temperature sensors, are those all built into the thermostat itself, or have they finally gone to having remote temperature sensors? Because I don't think that they have, and
I don't think they have either. Yeah, I didn't go to the training because the announcement was kind of like meh, and it's got some good stuff if you're in the market to buy a Nest thermostat. I think most people these days are kind of hanging back and waiting to see what happens, or buying an Ecobee and getting those remote sensors, because those are just really killer right now.
Yeah, it's still something that is very surprising to me that Ecobee seems to have the market cornered in terms of, a wireless thermostat that you plug into your existing, 5-wire HVAC system, and then you can go put external temperature sensors around your place. And I'm still surprised that Nest hasn't come out with anything to match that.
Yeah, I think you and everyone else. I mean, it really does look like a gap in their product. And maybe we're saying this, and those temperature sensors come in the box with a new Nest. I have no idea, but I'm just not as enthusiastic about a Nest thermostat as I was, a couple of years back. One thing they do have on here is greater Wi-Fi capability for a steady connection. That's always a good thing. I think the product, definitely want to have a good connection, especially for thermostat. Nest has traditionally been a pretty good product. So if it works for you, and it's the type of product that works for you, it's still a good buy. I mean, it's not a bad product at all. But I personally like the Ecobee a little bit better because of the sensors. If Nest just, and maybe they had them, then we're on equal footing now, but I don't know. I haven't heard anything else about it.
Well, my main thing with Nest has just been like, ever since the acquisition by Google, which was, massive, we haven't really seen much out of them other than the Nest Cam, which is basically like a drop cam that already existed, and now an updated version of the thermostat that they already had. So we really haven't seen anything new as far as hardware out of Nest since they were acquired by Google for like such a massive amount of money. And so I'm just kind of watching and waiting and trying to figure out what really the long-term play is with Nest. Yeah,
not too sure. But what's even stranger is that the OnHub came out last week before. I know we talked about it last week's show. And that device, it wasn't a Nest device. I mean, it's so weird that
right. That kind of device to me would have made perfect sense to be branded as a Nest home router.
Right.
It would have fit into this whole idea of your Nest and technology. And I just you're totally right. I was surprised that was branded the way it was, and I guess at a certain level I just don't get it.
I in my head, Nest is just like really double down and doing crazy stuff that will just all come out one day, and we'll be wowed by them. Because I mean, there's a super talented team there. It's backed by Google, and there's a lot of money, and the products they put out, like the products that they have, Drop Cam, Nest, the smoke detectors, which kind of had a bad rap for their waving thing.
Nest
Protect, yeah. Those have been pretty good product, and I mean most people have been pretty happy with them. So I just kind of waiting. We'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, Seth, we want to get into this interview here with Peter, but, real quick, and I know this is asking a lot because there was a ton of stories, but there was a big trade show in Germany this week, IFA, and I think, I'm going to put it on you to actually tell us what IFA means, but there was a lot of stories that came out of that, and I think it would be insightful before we jump into this interview to maybe share your thoughts on a couple of those.
Yeah, it's the Internationale Funkausstellung. And I have
Beautiful.
no idea if I pronounced that correctly. I had to go ask my wife.
I'm quite positive you didn't, but it was a good effort.
I'm brushing up on my German, so if I take a trip to Germany, that's all I'll be able to pronounce by the time I get there.
My understanding is that this is an old trade show that used to relate to the radio industry, but has sort of evolved into really the largest consumer electronics show in Europe. And this is a very big deal for people who haven't, the Yanks in the audience like us who haven't heard of this show. You should be paying attention because this is a lot of stuff happens here. And apparently it's a very, very large consumer electronics event.
Yeah, so we have CES here in the States, and this seems like a very similar type of show. There have been a lot of. I went and looked at the exhibitor list and kind of through some of the products, and there were a whole bunch of like IP cameras and that kind of thing. There are dishwashers and washer and dryers, and a bunch of consumer electronics and products. I know there was one. There was a particular company was really happy about releasing a washer that you could do 2 loads in at once. I still haven't figured that out, but evidently you can wash whites and colors now at the same time. How's that for HomeTech, Jason?
That's amazing.
So what we're going to focus on is probably what you typically always focus on, though, is picking up kind of the home automation and home electronics that you'd think go along with AV and home automation. And first, Panasonic came out with what they're calling the first 4K security camera. I don't know if that's true. Panasonic's always been a big player in the IP cameras, but this is the first like 4K drop cam style camera, is what it looks like to me. And it looks like a pretty cool camera. I mean, if you need full 4K resolution of whatever of your dog walking around your house, then this is the product to get, I think.
Well, to me, my first thought is that 4K is a lot of the people who debate the value of 4K are saying, at what point do you really see the difference? It all comes down to your viewing distance and the size of the screen. With security cameras, I feel like there's never too much resolution. Like if you can have a surveillance camera that is 4K, you're going to benefit from it regardless, because if something does happen and you have to rewind the tape and zoom in to see a certain part of the screen, those extra pixels are going to be very, very valuable. So I do feel like in terms of security, 4K is actually a very, very valuable proposition.
Yep, and this looks like a pretty cool camera. Like I said, it looks to compete with drop cam. It doesn't look like something I would be able to stick outside in a dome housing. And maybe they have a more commercial version setting off to the side somewhere. But this is more of a consumer-oriented show. And they have kind of the goofy products you expect. The next thing we're going to talk about is this Boost that is a light bulb that can also extend your Wi-Fi with a Wi-Fi extender built into it.
Yeah, it's like continuing our theme of things that should never be included in a light bulb. Right?
Yep. This is dumb.
It's I don't know. The idea behind this product is that you could quote unquote eliminate Wi-Fi dead spots in your house by simply screwing this light bulb into a socket and then presumably going onto some sort of web interface and configuring it. The problem with this, as I see it, I think it's the intent is good, but I just don't see how useful it is, because what happens when somebody, turns off the light switch? There's no internet. And so I don't know if, like I said, I understand the intent. I think it's interesting, but I just don't know how actually in a day-to-day use case, how practical it is.
Yeah, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And that's
exactly.
Yeah. So LG has released a new hub. I'm going to go ahead and ring the bell on that one. It's called the Smart...
Oh, he's even ringing the bell. I like it.
Yeah. Well, this thing is it's compatible with AllJoyn. LG released a bunch of other or has been showing off a bunch of other smart appliances that are compatible with AllJoyn. They have a light wave oven and an air conditioning unit that can all talk to each other over AllJoyn using this hub, which they're calling the Smart Thin Q. So that's Smart, THIN, and the letter Q, all smashed together. Very strange.
Which my assumption would be, I guess, think is how they're going to pronounce it.
Oh, yeah. Maybe that's it. Stop being clever. I don't know.
Just saying.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like a neat product. It's very well designed from a design standpoint, like an industrial design standpoint. But, we'll see. This is kind of the AllJoyn thing, and it's all like an open source framework that makes devices supposedly talk together to each other. And I just haven't seen that really grab too much traction. Maybe it will in the future.
In my mind, it's just interesting to see something from AllJoyn, because all I've ever seen before from them is sort of hypothetical, right? I mean, they've been around, they've got a lot of big players involved, but I haven't seen much in the way of commercial products that have that quote unquote AllJoyn stamp on them. And this struck me as one of those products that was like, hey, finally we're seeing AllJoyn out there in a commercially available product. And LG is one of these companies that is massive. I mean, people might not realize, but LG is a very, very large company. And I don't know. Who knows? I mean, they might be a sleeper in the smart home space. A product like this might take hold. To me, it's more likely just a something LG is doing now, and in a year or two from now, probably will walk away from. But who knows? I mean, the fact that LG is getting involved in getting in bed, or putting out projects that are AllJoyn, have that stamp on them, I think is interesting and worth noting.
Yeah, and ideally those products would work. It's an open source framework, so ideally, if LG gets out of the business, those products would still continue to work. I mean, that's probably nice. One of those nice things. You just kind of have to have faith that AllJoyn is going to be around.
Right.
And I'm not going to get too much into an interview later, but we definitely talked about that towards the end. And what, you kind of have to pick somebody's vision is what Peter said, which I found very succinct. So the next thing up is Harmony Elite. Logitech announced a Harmony Elite mode. I haven't been able to find anything at all about this other than one paragraph by someone who's been there. So hopefully some more info will come out about it, or one of the listeners of the show would kind of share some more information that may know about it. But it looks like this is a remote that works with Logitech's Harmony Hub to control not only the entire entertainment system, but smart home devices such as lighting, thermostats, door locks, window shades, and more. So sounds kind of cool. I just don't know much about it. I don't know too much about the Harmony line anyway, but I know we have quite a few listeners that may know something. So maybe this is something that's in the States and they were just kind of showing off over there. But I didn't get that impression from the story.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I mean, I know Logitech has been very active in terms of trying to get engaged in the smart home space, and I wouldn't be surprised if this was some sort of elaboration on that strategy. But I have to be honest with you, I'm not familiar with the story, and it sounds like information is a little bit sparse. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, and IFA, this is only day 2 of IFA. I believe it's a pretty long show, just like CES. So, I'm just kind of picking up stories as I see them go by on the news feed. And, if I see something that it has to do with home technology or a brand that you and I know, then I'll stick it in there. Speaking of brands and home technology, Samsung looks like they have announced an OLED 4K THX certified TV.
Panasonic. You
Is it
said
Panasonic?
Samsung.
Oh, what am I doing? So, okay.
No problem.
Yep. So LG was the only player showing off OLED TVs in the past. Now Panasonic's thrown their hat in the ring. They've got a 4K OLED UHD TV now, which all those things. How am I saying all those things and not? I don't understand.
You're doing a good job. I think to me, OLED is the real deal. The only question is, can manufacturers bring it down to a price point that's competitive with LED? And I think the fact that Panasonic is throwing their hat in the ring here is really interesting. I was actually kind of bummed to hear that this was a curved TV, and I think that's my understanding from reading the article was that the only panel they're doing with OLED is curved. And in my opinion, curved TVs are a gimmick. I do think OLED is the real deal. From everything I hear about it, and from everything I've seen on trade show floors, the colors you get out of it are incredible. It's just a question of if they can get the manufacturing costs down on OLED. I think it crushes anything that LED can do. Even fully, full array backlit LED, all that. OLED is the premier technology as far as I'm concerned. It's only a question of, can they get the pricing down? And that's really what everybody's asking right now. And I think the fact that Panasonic is throwing their hat in the ring is significant and something that shouldn't be ignored. I mean, really, like you alluded to, up until this point, LG was the only one doing it. So for Panasonic to kind of throw their hat in the ring, doubles the competition, right? So let's see if they can execute on that. And I think OLED is as hard as it is to say, is a technology to watch.
Well, this is not only OLED, it's 4K OLED UHD with THX certification, and it's also fully HDR compatible, which, out of all the things, the HDR thing is probably the most, we're joking about how many an acronym things we can say, but the HDR thing
is significant.
Yeah, that's the best thing. It covers 90% of, here we go again, the DCI color space, which is pretty awesome when you consider most TVs don't even come close to that these days. So HDR, there's an article that I found from The Verge that came out right before IFA, basically saying don't buy 4K TVs because the next generation of 4K TVs, like this one, are going to have HDR compatibility. And those are the TVs that are really going to make a difference on not only 4K content, but back down to 1080p content. Because
whatever you watch.
Yeah, the picture's going to be so much better. And, that's what we're seeing here. This is going to be the top of the line. Hit stores in Europe, hit shelves in Europe, it says this October. So the first THX certified 4K UHD OLED TV from Panasonic.
There you go.
Oh, man. All right. Now that we're done twisting the tongues up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, enough with the tongue twisters, right? We've got some news from SmartThings we wanted to share.
Yeah. At IFA, they announced their next generation hub. Gonna hear it ring the bell a little bit quieter. Yeah. So good for SmartThings. It looks like an exciting product. It's got both Zigbee and Z-Wave, like their previous hub did. But it also has 2 USB ports and embedded Bluetooth for future expansion. So it looks like a really cool piece. And, SmartThings, they're owned by Samsung, but before they were owned by Samsung, they were still a serious competitor in the DIY, home automation market where you're just kind of hooking up sensors and that kind of thing. It's still a pretty good platform, and I think one of the best looking apps that you can interact with your home is made by SmartThings. So keep an eye out for these guys. They're going to be around for a while.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they've got strong money behind them, and they're doing great work. And I think certainly SmartThings is a a product that isn't going away anytime soon, and definitely something I'd look at if I was doing a smart home right now. And you can't ignore them, right?
No, not at all. I mean, they're definitely a major player. It is one of those ecosystems, you have to kind of pick, but they do branch out to both Z-Wave, Zigbee, and now Bluetooth, it looks like. So they're covering all their bases. They're iterating on their product and coming up with bigger and better things. So definitely keep an eye on these guys. They've got really good management at the top, and it shows.
Well, yeah, definitely. And, we want to jump in here to the interview. And we had Peter Hoddie on from Kinoma Create, which is, Kinoma is actually now a subdivision within Marvell, which is a major chip manufacturer. And we get into all that. But long story short, Peter was a fantastic interview. We really enjoyed the conversation, and he's got a lot of great insights. He's got a super interesting background that we're going to touch on. We don't spend a ton of time on, but really the guy is, at the end of the day, very credentialed and definitely has a lot of interesting things to say about the way that technology is going and the developer community. And Seth, I'd be curious to know, before we jump into the interview here, what did you think?
I really think he's spot on in a number of things. One that's close to my heart, design. I think we touched on that right at the beginning of the interview. And he has a background, comes from Apple. So designing hardware and software to kind of work together to achieve a goal. That's Apple's main thing. And he's definitely brought it over to what is essentially just a maker type product. And I think that's kind of hard to do. When most people think of maker products, they're thinking of little breadboards, and they're thinking of loose diodes and Arduinos, and this thing looks like a product you could just go buy off the shelf. Yeah, it's really polished. It's got a touch screen built into it. I mean, really, really neat product. So, really good interview, and he's definitely a thought leader in the industry. He had made some very good points about where we are in the world of home automation and Internet of Things. And super bright guy, and I agree completely with what you said, and I think the impact of that maker community and open source software is going to be huge on the smart home. And so, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in right here to our interview with Peter. Peter, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on Home Tech. I've been looking forward to the conversation, and I know you've got an interesting product and something that I believe our listeners are going to be very interested in. But, before we dive into that, and we're going to spend the bulk of the time on that, I would love if you could just give our listeners a personal introduction. I know that you have a very interesting background, and I don't want you to be too modest during this introduction. If you could just let the audience know kind of who you are and where you came from prior to your involvement with Kinoma, I think that would be very insightful.
Sure. I was fortunate to start my my engineering career at Apple back in the 90s. And at that time, the QuickTime project was starting up, which was the first really consumer effort to put video onto personal computers. And by incredibly good luck, I was part of the team that did the first version of that, and many versions after that. After about a decade there, working with all the different CEOs that Apple had up to that time, I spun out into kind of startup land and did a startup during the internet bubble, and then another one after the internet bubble, and that one was Kinoma. And our goal was really to do a much easier way for people to program for embedded devices. And so at that time, we did a huge amount of work with Sony, in fact. And one of the products that came out of that was the Sony Reader, which predated Kindle by over a year. And that work led us to do a lot with JavaScript, which we found to be a remarkably efficient way to build the software for all these embedded devices. And then a few years ago, we spun into Marvell Semiconductor, which is a big giant public company that makes something on the order of 1 billion chips a year. And they brought us in to kind of continue that work that we started with Kinoma, to help them figure out how to accelerate the software development for all the chips that they're making. And so we've kind of taken the work that we started with Kinoma and working the lessons we learned with Sony and have been applying that more broadly here at Marvell.
Okay, great. So just to clarify real quick, the relationship between you and Marvell is you were acquired basically, right? Now you're a division within the larger company. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's right. And they've, it's at some level, it's about 7,000 people working on computer chips and 30 people working on Kinoma. So we're vastly outnumbered. And so the company's been very kind and kind of let us operate fairly independently within the company. So we have, all the great resources of the company and access to all of the talented people here. But we're still able to operate a lot like a startup because what we're doing is pretty different from kind of the fundamental business of the company.
Yeah, so that's great. I mean, you're kind of getting the best of both worlds there, and I do want to, of course, jump in pretty quickly here to what you guys are doing currently, because I think it's pretty exciting given everything that's going on right now. But just kind of a little bit more background, I think, on Kinoma. I think you had an interesting team that started that out. Can you give us sort of the brief version about who your team was and where and when that started up, and just kind of the genesis of Kinoma as a company?
Yeah, you said we started it kind of coming out of the internet bubble, and my previous company had been financed with venture capital, and that was interesting, especially coming out of the bubble where venture capitalists got really skittish with their money. And so one of the things that we did when we started the company is we said we wanted to be completely standalone. We didn't want to take any outside money so that we could develop technology at our own pace rather than kind of at the pace that our investors thought was right, because we wanted to make something for the long haul. And given that we started that company 13 years ago and we're still working on that technology, I think that call worked out really well. My co-founders were two other engineers, Mike Kellner and Brian Friedkin, who worked with me at Apple. They both are extraordinary engineers with really good skills at making software portable. And we really use that a lot. And you can see still in Kinoma, our stuff runs on all kinds of different platforms, from iOS to Windows to Linux and so forth, and Android. And then the fourth founder was Elizabeth Dykstra Erickson. And Elizabeth was a user interface designer that I worked with at Apple. And she and I worked with Tim Wasco and Steve LeMay and Steve Jobs doing a lot of user interface work when we were there. And so part of the other kind of idea with Kinoma was not to just focus on technology, but to do things that had great design. And Elizabeth has since moved on to other adventures, including some time at Palm and Nokia. And we still have designers built into my team, and always have, so that it's not just engineers building things that they think look good or make sense, but that we always have designers here who are working every day with the engineers to make the right decisions and make the right trade-offs.
Yeah, that's a great way to run things, because I know how kind of crazy we can be with getting like settings everywhere. Just put settings everywhere, as many settings as you possibly can, and let the end user kind of figure out what they want to do. In reality, the end user just kind of wants to flip one switch and have it work, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think settings is one of those things where, if an engineer runs into a question of should it be this way or that way, the obvious answer is let's let the user decide. So we put in another setting, right? And some designers will say, okay, well, let's make the setting look nice, right? That will be kind of their contribution. But I think the really great designers will ask the question, why do we need a setting? Right?
Yeah,
absolutely. Can we choose one? And I remember the lead engineer on QuickTime 1.0, this many years ago, but he had a rule. He said, we aren't going to have any user options in version 1. Like none at all.
Yeah.
And somehow we were going to have to figure out how to make that work. But he recognized the slippery slope that you can get on once you start to let people configure everything. It's a lot of power, but most people are just kind of baffled by that and cause more harm than good.
Right, and I think seeing what you've made here and seeing what kind of what and understanding your background from Apple, I think it was like Don Melton or someone that I was listening to once on a podcast that was saying when he was project managing Safari, he would ask his team, what's the default, and that would be the setting. There would be no setting. That would be how they ship the product, which I always thought was a very interesting way to just kind of cut out the question of should we have a setting or not. Yeah,
I mean, it's a great thing to try, right? The beautiful thing about software is you can do that, because if you make a bad choice, right, if the default really doesn't work for a substantial part of your audience, you can update the software. And so that is really a smart way to start in most cases.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about hardware. You've got a nice little piece called Kinoma Create. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And I guess let our listeners know what that is.
Sure. Kinoma Create is a prototyping device. So we built it to help other people kind of bring their product ideas to life. People do that today and have done that with things like Arduino or Raspberry Pi. And what we found is those are great products, and they are, beautifully documented and lots of sample projects out there. But they're intimidating for people both at the hardware and the software level. And so there's a lot of people, kind of sitting on the sidelines of making, who are interested to get involved but aren't quite sure they should start. And so, we just kind of rethought what would be a great device for somebody to start making, to prototype their ideas and learn about the interactions between hardware and software. And Kinoma Create came out of that. And it's different from kind of the more traditional prototyping devices in two main ways. In the hardware, everything is kind of just there already. It's not a bare green board that you have wires hanging out of it. It looks like a real product. It comes with a nice green and white case that looks like a consumer device. It has a built-in touchscreen, built-in Wi-Fi, built-in Bluetooth, speaker, microphone, and battery. So, out of the box, you don't really need to attach anything to do some pretty interesting things. And so that hardware is ready to go. And then the other side, the software, we, as I said earlier, we've built a lot of what we do around the JavaScript language. And so the Kinoma Create device, the primary programming language is JavaScript. And for most people, they never have to leave that because we've brought all of the functionality for talking to pins, serial, digital I2C, PWM, all that stuff up into the JavaScript layer. And so that means that web developers, node developers, students can really quickly start coding because they don't have to install lots of tools, reflash a ROM, rebuild a kernel, all those kinds of things. And so they can focus much more on what's the product they want to build, what's the idea that they want to express, than dealing with those technical details.
Right, and I think JavaScript's a great choice for that because, like you said, it's a very well-known language at this point by just about anybody, and it's fairly easy to pick up. It's a fairly forgiving language, I guess, is kind of the way I would put it. It seems to be one of those learning languages that most people who have interacted with the web have run across at some point and can program in.
I think forgiving is exactly the way I describe it. I think it's a great way of putting it. There was it's used in so many places now. It was on the web for front end. It's now in Node for the back end, and that the people who are doing full stack development love that, right? Because they can use a lot of the same knowledge and sometimes the same code or tools in both places. And by using the same language now in embedded devices and IoT devices, right? We kind of broaden the circle of devices and experiences people can build with those skills.
Yeah. Well, I could geek out on the software. I really want to kind of loop back to the hardware here and just take a little bit more of a look at it. I think if anybody's listening to this podcast and they're hearing prototype device, they're probably not very familiar. They may not be very familiar with what we're talking about here, but I know that a lot of people have probably heard of maybe like a Raspberry Pi or Arduino and those types of boards. I think that's probably what you would say your competitors would be, but I think that your device it really does step up the game because you have it it looks more like a consumer-facing device. Like you said, it has a touch screen on it. It has all of the things that maybe a touch screen or a screen on it.
No, it's a touch screen.
A touch screen, okay.
Full cap touch.
Yeah, it has all of the sensor I/O on it that you could possibly want. This is really what a prototyping platform should look like, I think. It's pretty amazing what you've done here.
Thanks. I mean, it's really, when we looked at what people were doing, it's very, Arduino is a good example. It's a beautiful place to start, right? And there's a lot of great material there. But as soon as you kind of try to do something a little bit more sophisticated or a little more polished, it starts to get very difficult. And so we just wanted people to be able to kind of have everything in one place to play with, because when you're getting started, it's not so much about making the most cost-effective design or the smallest device. It's about making something that works. And this kind of comes back to our kind of design heritage, where, in our experience kind of building devices and coming up with product concepts, we think we have a great idea, and then we build it, and we find out actually it was a terrible idea. And so you want to, or it was an okay idea that needs some work. And so you want to get your idea built and working quickly so that you can get it in front of people and so you can live with it for a little bit. Because, everything else depends on the idea being right. And so you don't want to overinvest in polish or, overinvest in your own printed circuit board design before you know that the basic idea that you're trying to build is correct. And so we really believe in iteration and rapid iteration. And, we've seen this with our customers. We are, as I said, we're part of Marvell. And, the chip that powers Kinoma Create is, of course, a Marvell chip. And, our salespeople now, when they're calling on customers, will take a Kinoma Create and leave it behind with the customers if it's a good, if it looks like a good fit for what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that lets the customers kind of get started with learning about our software and even prototyping their products very quickly. And it really changes things. Our traditional customer is an embedded developer who's working in C or C++ and isn't really, into user experience as much. We had one customer recently take a Kinoma Create and put it in the hands of a company whose design they really liked. And that company had a bunch of web developers, and they took their web design skills and prototyped things on Kinoma Create to get a sense of what using the product would be like, to get a sense of whether their ideas would work well on the hardware that we provided. And that got them moving much faster, in fact, both with the idea and with the technology. And so, we kind of built this for the makers. And it turns out, of course, the professional programmers and the professionals are also really happy to have something that will kind of speed up their development and let them validate their ideas.
Yeah, and that actually segues perfectly into a question that's kind of been on my mind as I'm listening to you here, and that's, Kinoma Create is obviously very much about prototyping, and my question is, and I'm thinking as the non-developer here in the group and the guy who just sort of works in the business and hasn't gotten into software, my question is sort of from the layman's perspective, how does this product relate to I guess what I would call commercial development? In other words, if I'm somebody who's a maker and I've got an idea for a smart home product that I want to prototype and I want to test out, and then eventually I hope to see it on the shelves at Best Buy, what is the relationship between the Kinoma Create? Is this strictly a tool for learning and prototyping? And then if that's the case, like, how do I go to the next step? Do I take it to commercial development just using the chips? Hopefully my question is making sense, but I'll let you kind of go with that.
It's a very good question, and I think you're asking about kind of the path to productization, right? Once you've got the idea working, can I manufacture? And this is also something we thought about a lot because a lot of prototypes will get done on hardware that's unrelated to the final product. And that's a disaster because, once you make the choice to go into production, you throw everything you built away and start again. that can't make you go faster. And so, we the chip that's in Kinoma Create, Marvell's been selling now for some years to our commercial customers. It's a production chip. There are factories in China that know how to manufacture that. There are system houses around the world that have worked with it, and so they can really take that there. To accelerate the process, we've been very open with Kinoma Create. So, for example, we published all of the 3D design files for the case. So you can, for your prototype, if you want to put a different case on it, you can just snap the case off that we have and 3D print one on and connect it. And we've had people do that. We also provide all of the PCB, the printed circuit board files. So you can make your own. You can start with our board design, and you can make your own boards from that. And that's all provided under Creative Commons licenses, so there's no charge to use that knowledge. And then all of the Kinoma software, all the core Kinoma software is available under an Apache open source license, and all that's up on GitHub. So if for some reason, I hope not, but if for some reason, the Marvell silicon doesn't work for you in your final product, you could still take our software, port it to somebody else's chip, and keep using the scripts that you wrote in that environment. So there's a lot of different paths you can take there. But the great thing is your prototype work can go straight through to final production on both the hardware and the software, and you get to make the choice. We're not trying to lock you into that. We're trying to give you the tools to make the right decision for your product.
Yeah, and I think you answered that question perfectly, because I think for somebody who's looking at this product going, well, who is this for and what does this actually do? I think you've kind of encapsulated it there. This is about inventing, and this is about making and creating and kind of removing people who want to do that from the tedium of sort of some of that lower level stuff that has to go on there. But I would, before we get into some of the more technical stuff or dive back into some of the technical stuff, as I should say, I know you guys crowdfunded the project, and I just wanted to touch on that. We're Home Tech here. We're not the business show. We don't focus on crowdfunding and the numbers and all of that. But I would like to touch on that just because I think it speaks to the importance of community involvement. Maybe you can sort of dovetail a conversation about the importance of your developer community into that, and how has the support from crowdfunding and the developer community kind of helped you guys along, and maybe I'll let you run with that and just kind of touch on your thoughts on that.
Sure. Crowdfunding was an interesting choice, and it wasn't entirely obvious. Marvell, clearly being a public company, doesn't need the money particularly to do the product. But what Marvell needs is the confidence in this direction. As I said, we're a very small part of Marvell, exploring some new ideas for the company. And, you can, if you've ever been in a large company, you can get a lot of people in a room and debate, ideas. And so Kinoma Create, was slowly falling into that trap. Should we make it? Okay, yeah, we should try. How many should we make? One person says, you should make 500,000 units. The other person's like, you should make 6. And, nobody can tell you what's the right number. Everybody has a different reason. And so crowdfunding solved that part of the problem, right? We asked people if they were interested in our concept. We showed them what it could do. We answered their questions, and, they voted with their money. And they said, yeah, this seems like a great idea. We want to try it. We're willing to support it. And that helped us, sort out what should be the size of our initial production run. And it also helped us kind of define who are the people that we're building this product for. We found that the audience we attracted was a little bit different from the audience that we had originally set out to address. Our initial thought was web developers, and so JavaScript would be a great fit there. And we did get a bunch of web developers, but we got a surprising number of prototyping engineers and embedded engineers. And we were a little bit surprised, but as we asked them, what we heard is that if you're a hardware engineer, the software is kind of the thing you have to do, but you don't love. And you're trying to get it done and get it done good enough. And if they can work in JavaScript, that will let them move more quickly to get the software done so they can focus on the hardware. And so I thought that was interesting. And so that led us down a path of taking a harder look at some of the things that we do to support people coming from that background in terms of how you integrate different hardware components, support for development on Linux, which wasn't in our original roadmap. We added as a result of feedback from the community. And so, it really began a conversation with the community about, what should we do? What's the priority? What materials do we need to provide? While giving Marvell a confidence boost to move ahead with this so that we could do the mass production that was necessary.
Very interesting. Great. I kind of want to touch a little bit on some of maybe your favorite use cases of Kinoma Create. I'm looking through some of the tutorials that you have, and just kind of taking a look at some that kind of relate to what our audience might find interesting. Like there's definitely the lighting control type thing. There's one that uses an iOS app and the Kinoma Create to turn on and off a little LED, and then one that I find very interesting. It uses the Kinoma Create and connects to the Xively API, which is one of those very large, I guess we'd call it data broker, who basically stores data online for the internet devices, for like Internet of Things. What are your favorite use cases, that you've seen people come up and create with Kinoma, and then which ones do you which ones do you think would be good for the home?
Yeah, my personal favorite is the hang glider, and I think it's I like it because it really uses some of the unique aspects of Kinoma Create. For one, the hang glider does not have an AC power outlet, so it's really taking advantage of the battery. The touchscreen is being used for display of information and to be able to tune that. And sensors are being used across the hang glider to collect information from the wingtips, where when you're in a hang glider, you can't just go out there and measure it yourself. Right, so this developer really built something that there's not a whole lot of parallels to in the world, and it was something that was personally useful for him. And the cool thing about it is, when I first heard about it, I thought, oh, he's collecting data about his flight. So he can see what was the temperature, or what was the humidity, whatever. And as he went, but it turns out it's way cooler than that. It's for real time use during the flight. Because, of course, a hang glider has no motor either. And so you're looking for air currents, and those basically are temperature differentials, right? Hot air rises. And so by looking at the temperature between the two wingtips, he's able to tell where's the warm air.
Wow.
And to steer into that so he can stay aloft longer. Right.
I had to search for this. This looks really cool. I mean, it's one thing I don't think I'd be able to do myself, but I like motors on my plane. But this looks really cool, and this is something that is completely outside of what I would have ever thought of. I mean, honestly, this is way out there. But yeah, this looks really cool.
But I mean, and it's one of the things I like. I think that's really is in several of the other projects that we've seen, is that they aren't mainstream. You mentioned, yes, we have the obligatory lighting controller, and you can do all those things, and they're great and they're useful, and of course we should do it. But I think what's cool is when individuals are kind of building things that aren't what a multinational is going to make. Right? We don't need to replicate the great work that Samsung's doing or Apple's doing or whoever. Right? We can build something that is not mainstream, but is still useful to a bunch of people. The aquarium controller project is another really nice example of that. There's lots of people who have fish, and you want to take good care of them, and it's literally life and death for the fish if you don't get it right. And so having a digital aquarium controller that's remotely accessible can really change how well you can take care of that. And again, Apple's not going to make a digital aquarium controller in our lifetimes, but somebody can make a really nice one. They can share their knowledge and how they did that online, and other people could build it for themselves and contribute to it or improve it. And so those are the things where I think we've we've gotten to the point with digital where we can make our ideas. 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, when I was working closely with Sony, that was impossible, right? Sony had factories and could make things, but we couldn't. It's sort of like, in our homes, we make furniture, we paint the walls, we do things with our yards, we can do all that. But digital's been off limits until just the last few years as the maker movement's really taken off. And I think that's what's really cool.
Yeah. No, I think, like I said, I love that. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. And that's, as we're kind of running up against our time here, that's what I want to close the conversation with, is your thoughts on not necessarily your specific product, but just how the smart home is evolving, because obviously our audience is a smart home enthusiasts. And I want to get your thoughts on how that whole world is evolving and how this ease of merging software and hardware, and how we can just go out and take these ideas and put them into the space easier than we ever could before. I want to get your thoughts on the impact of that in the home. Do you think we are at a tipping point in the smart home? And do you think that in the near future, or in the future in general, we're going to see a home where more people embrace this idea of being able to kind of tinker with technology and automate things and use technology in ways that currently a lot of times we think about as only the realm of people who can afford these very expensive home automation systems? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's inevitable. I think the price of the technology is dropping so quickly. Today, maybe it costs $5 or $10 worth of parts to add, Wi-Fi control to a product, an existing product. If you look down the road 5 years, and I get to do that sitting at Marvell, you're talking about $1 or $2 for those components, right? And so it's going to become harder and harder to build a product that doesn't have connectivity in it, and the ability to remote control and collect data. So we're going to have those. The question is, how are we going to use them, right? We are really, really early in the industry. And we were talking earlier about kind of my personal history. When I started working on digital video, the idea of video on a computer back in 1991 was insane. And, we would show it to people, and there were two groups of people. There were the kind of the technologists and the engineers who would say, wow, that's incredible, that's amazing. And they could see kind of the potential of what it would grow into. And then you had the other group of people who said, why is it so small? What's the point? My TV is much bigger. And it's really expensive. And so we're still at that point. And what happens at that early stage of the industry is that you have these islands. There were all these different video editors, all these different video formats that were all incompatible and didn't work together, right? So you bought an Avid and you stayed with Avid for 5 years and you couldn't use anything else. And that changed in part because of the work we did with QuickTime, because we were very open. We published the file format specs from day one. We went through the ISO standardization process. We brought it to Windows, which, for Apple was kind of heresy at the time, and maybe still.
Right.
But we wanted the video to travel wherever the creator wanted to put it, right? And so we didn't want to dictate where you could play the video just because of the hardware you made it on. And so Internet of Things is in that really infancy stage. We can do a lot of cool stuff, right? And in kind of these closed ecosystems, Smart Things or HomeKit, or you can name more than I can probably. You can do some pretty neat things, but you kind of have to buy into somebody's vision, right? Somebody's control to some extent. And I think what's got to happen for IoT to realize the potential that we all see is it's got to be open so that we can connect any 2, any 3 devices together that we want to, because it's our home and it's our devices, and why shouldn't we be allowed to do that? So it's early. People aren't demanding that, but I think they will. And then, to your question, will people really program that? Will they build their own stuff? And here at Marvell, we're doing this interesting mentoring project this fall with a group of elementary school students. They're coming here once a week to learn kind of making and programming with us using Kinoma Create, and it's frightening. We're in Silicon Valley, so it's maybe a little bit higher than normal, but it's frightening how many of the kids show up who have already done programming, and
Yeah.
so they're not like showing up thinking, why would I want to do this? No, they show up, they've done it before, they have ideas. If you show them, oh, you can connect these lights together with these buttons, all of a sudden they've got 16 ideas for a game, right? And so they're growing up in a world where they just expect it, right? So, I don't know if it's going to be 5 years, but in 10 years, those kids are going to be like, full-grown consumers. Right. And so it's going to happen because it's the only things they're going to be willing to buy.
Right. And I make this analogy with some of my clients. I'm here in Sarasota, Florida, which is mostly a retirement community. But one thing I tell my clients is, the generation that precedes me, my parents' generation, you probably started off with a TV that had, and I'm kind of relating this to what I do. You had a TV that started off with 3, maybe 4 channels and over broadcast, and now you have the option of getting thousands of channels in high definition, and that's what one generation was able to do with one particular technology, just because they woke up every morning and they walked around the living room door and there was a TV in the house. Kids are growing up today with tablets. I mean, they're waking up and there's a tablet right next to them. So those kids are going to be able to do so much more with technology. It's going to be mind bending to see what this generation growing up with the technology. And I'm so glad you're participating in education, because that's a very, very important thing. I'm glad that is this part of like a STEM program? Are people using it for STEM?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's an after-school program. It's actually specifically for girls to try to get more women comfortable with technology. Whether they end up being engineers or not, but just to really know that that's something that they can do. And so it's a lot of fun.
That's great. Do you know what the name of that is? So we would want to put that in the show notes for sure. So if people wanted to check that out.
Yeah, the program is called Kids Vision, and it's very cool. They've got some videos up. Last spring, they hosted sessions at Tesla and at Yahoo. And they got to do some really cool things. One of the projects was a teardown, and they got to take apart some components that go into a Tesla sedan. So it's
very
really
cool.
It's really, it's very. I wish I were there.
Yeah, I wish I could have done that.
Yeah. I mean, we love the story. We love the product. We love what you guys are doing, and think that really obviously its implications are larger than just the smart home. But we get excited about products like this because, Seth and I watch the smart home very closely, and we get excited about anything that gets people innovating and getting younger generations involved in developing and all of that. I think it's great. I think it's a noble mission. We really appreciate you coming on the show and joining us. We're kind of running up against our time here, and I want to sort of wind up the conversation with kind of looking forward. What is the team at Kinoma getting excited about right now? Do you guys have any upcoming releases or any information about what you're working on now that you can share with our audience?
Yeah, we're it's a little geeky, but the biggest thing on our kind of immediate horizon is we're working hard on what's called ECMAScript 6th edition or JavaScript 6th edition, which is a huge revision to the JavaScript language that adds a lot of really new useful features. And I won't try to explain them all to you now, but if people are curious, we've got a lot of information about it on the website. And then beyond that, we got a couple more hardware products in the pipeline. We've got Kinoma Element, which is a little I think it's $20 right now on pre-order. Products sort of like Kinoma Create without a screen for doing kind of simpler Internet of Things products. And we have Kinoma HD, which is a $25 media stick that plugs into televisions so that you can use JavaScript to put whatever you want onto your TV. And, we've demoed that, for example, as a dashboard for the Internet of Things devices inside your home. So some really cool stuff and a very long fall in front of us with that.
Yeah, and that one I love. I know I had it on my list here of things to touch on, but obviously it's an upcoming product, and maybe you guys can just keep us posted when that comes out. But I know a lot of people in our audience, systems integrators, guys who are out implementing smart homes for people currently as a profession, might be interested in that one, because basically the form factor is akin to something like the Google Chromecast or Chrome stick or whatever
Exactly.
they're calling it. But it plugs into an HDMI port. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, it's a little stick like an Amazon Fire or a Google Chromecast. It's really fun because almost everybody has a big TV hiding in their house somewhere.
Yep.
And to be able to control everything that's on it is really kind of neat.
Yeah, I think that's still a relatively unexplored area in terms of user interaction with the smart home, and I think you guys are wise to be looking at that. So once again, Peter, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on to Home Tech. I really enjoyed the conversation. And for anybody listening who might want to find out more or maybe connect with you and ask you a follow-up question or two, what would be the best way for them to do that?
For information, the Kinoma website is easy, KINOMA.com. For questions, I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is PHODDIE, or just use the Kinoma Twitter account as well. I'm happy to hear from people.
Awesome. Well, Peter, thanks again for taking the time to join us, and we look forward to talking to you again in the future.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
And that's our interview with Peter Hoddie. If you'd like to look up some of the things that we were talking about, check out our show notes over at HomeTech.fm/shows/78. HomeTech is a proud member of the Technology FM family. We really like some of the podcasts that are over at Technology.fm. If you like HomeTech, you probably will like many of the other podcasts over there. So go over there and check them out.
Absolutely. And, we just want to, again, as always, thank you so much for listening. If you have any feedback, comments, suggestions, the best way to do that is hometech.fm/feedback. Once again, go check out all the other shows at technology.fm. And if you have any comments, suggestions, or feedback, you can also find us on Twitter at HomeTech Podcast. We thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to chatting with you next week.